Welcome to the Hormone Hub, your go-to source for the conversations every woman in her 40s and 50s needs to have. I'm your host, Kylie Pinwill, your nutritionist helping you navigate your way through perimenopause, menopause and beyond so you can say goodbye to endless fatigue, unexplained weight gain, hot flushes, PMS, mood changes and more that come on this hormonal rollercoaster. If you missed the memo or think this is only for women of a certain age, ladies, it's time to think again. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of my latest episodes, which are released every week. Share it with your friends, your sweaty sisters. The more we talk, the more we help each other. And welcome back to the Hormone Hub. It's so exciting to have you here. Today, I want to share a bit with you about my own hormonal struggles and how I became such an advocate for women's health and hormones. We are quite complex creatures, and never in my experience of working with hundreds of women have two women ever had the same story. And the great shame of this is there's one fixes-all approach, or one size fixes all, or one diet fixes all, comes to women's hormonal health. And the medical profession quite often doesn't know what to do with us. You know, we aren't sick and it's not a condition. There's no medical test, but we know within ourselves that something quite right. And too often women are dismissed because there's nothing technically or medically wrong. So they're left thinking that they're going crazy or they just have to put up with feeling this way because it's just a part of getting older. Well, ladies, I'm here to tell you it is not a normal part of getting older and you don't have to put up with it. Okay, so today I'm going to share about where my hormones went haywire. Okay, so everything was fine. I always had normal periods. Nothing was really an issue until I was pregnant with my second son. I was having a facial, I was lying there, I was about 6 months pregnant, and the beauty therapist to me, she goes, "Oh, what's that big lump in the middle of your throat?" She said, "I think that's where your thyroid is." Now, to be honest, at this point, I had no idea even what my thyroid was, let alone why it was a big deal. She said, "You should mention it to your doctor next time you see him." So I did. Who sort of said, "Can you have a look? I've got this big lump in my throat." And, you know, at this stage, I was like, why hasn't I noticed this? Why hasn't my husband noticed this? You know, why is it the beauty therapist who noticed it? And as soon as I mentioned it to my obstetrician, it was action stations. So I had all the blood tests, I had fine needle biopsies, I had ultrasounds, you know, you name it, I had it done. Turned out I had a tumour in my thyroid. So they didn't know at that point if it was cancerous or not. So this big question mark over my head for the pregnancy, which is pretty traumatic, I think, to go through the rest of your pregnancy with that hanging over your head. So, you know, story short, 4 weeks after my middle son, Lucas, I had the thyroid surgery and all things were well. There was no cancer, but I was just left with half a thyroid. I was, you know, patted on the back going, all good, no cancer, off you go. So no one kind of ever explained what life was going to look like with only half a thyroid. Now, if thyroid is sort of a mystery to you as well, thyroid controls our metabolism. So our ability to regulate our body temperature, our overall digestion, our metabolism, you know, it affects basically every single cell in our body. So it's kind of a big deal. Last few months, you know, I was exhausted. I had a baby and I had a toddler. So, you know, really at that point, what's tired and what's baby and toddler mum tired? I had no idea. And then, you know, obviously they were keeping an eye on my blood levels. So, you know, they just popped me on medication, but they didn't really tell me what it was or how long I was going to need it for, you know, and this is 15 years ago. I'm still on it, by the way. So over the years, I've had bouts of sort of debilitating fatigue. You know, even though I was eating fairly well, I've always been quite active. And, you know, this was the worst part, the most confusing part to me was because I kept, you know, I was training really hard. I was pushing myself through, but I was constantly sick. I was, you know, bloated. And I thought that this was my normal because, been back to the doctor several times, I'm so tired. And he's like, oh, everything's normal, it's fine. So, I did think that it was in my head and I was going crazy. And then this was just the way that it had to be. So it finally sort of came to a head a few years later. I recognized that, I was burnt out. And, this sort of over the time I had restudied, retrained, had been seeing a lot of women in clinic, and fatigue and what they were describing to me was exactly how I felt. But I was great at hiding it, pushing through and just pushing it to the side. So, to keep my weight in check, I was running, I was doing high intensity exercise, I was doing, workouts similar to sort of CrossFit type workouts. And it was just getting bigger and I was just getting more sluggish until, I reached a point sort of my sort of early 40s where I was just dying. Like I needed a sleep after lunch. I could not get through that afternoon. Now, what I had in hindsight was adrenal fatigue or, adrenal insufficiency, as it's also known. Now, again, this isn't a medically diagnosed condition. And this is sort of one of the biggest reasons I think that women aren't heard when they go to their doctor and they say, they're at their point of exhaustion and they're like, I'm so tired. And anyone who's hit this point of exhaustion will tell you how real and how debilitating it is. So all of your blood tests will come up normal, but they won't be in that optimal range. And I do have more of what your blood tests and what your blood results mean in an upcoming episodes. So if you're curious or relate to this, some of the signs of adrenal fatigue or burnout or exhaustion, really doesn't matter what we call it, are sugar and carb cravings because you're depleted. You're looking for that pick-me-up. You've got salt cravings as well. So, you want that salty because your adrenals are like craving, they need that sodium. Any brain fog, just that inability to concentrate, it literally feels like your brain is sludging through mud. You can have trouble sleeping at night, no matter how tired you are. And, your body will be under stress. Okay, so you are operating in survival mode. So once you've experienced adrenal fatigue, you're more susceptible to go through it again. And I always liken it to a dance. So it's always there on the sidelines. So you need to, managing it just takes some awareness and a willingness to acknowledge the signs and look after yourself. So to, nourish your body. So this is not the time for cutting carbs or doing, crazy long fasts. You want to, still exercise, but move your body in a way that feels good for you. You want to go to bed early, don't wait for that second wind to kick in because that just makes it all worse. Catch up with a friend, laugh, have a good time. It's amazing how that can just reduce all of those stress hormones. And another one is avoiding caffeine and alcohol. We tend to reach for those. And so many women, are on that survival, that coffee in the morning. They're having wine at night. They're having sugar in the afternoons. And they're just doing this just to get through. This Hormone Hub episode is sponsored by The Well-Balanced Woman. If you've been on a hormonal rollercoaster, feeling bloated, your digestion isn't the best, and you're sick and tired of feeling lethargic with your weight creeping up, then this is the right program for you. I'm right there with you across the 12 weeks to hold your hand, and I'll give you a loving kick up the bum if you need it. The Well-Balanced Woman is your personalised 4-phase program created to help you regain your energy, balance your hormones and fire up your metabolism so you get the results you're after. The link with all the details is on our show notes or over at kyliepinwell.com/well-balanced-woman. Okay, so once I sort of realised what was going on, I was able to put the pieces together. It's funny how I can see it in clients a mile away. It's so much harder to recognise in myself. I really decided to clean up my act. I had Mirena for about 8 years, but I just felt that it wasn't right for me at the time. So my GP, who was amazing, she listened and she was willing to let, the tests that I had run. So, doctors will do blood tests and then, nutritionists, perhaps hormone and cortisol tests. And, my GP was on board and she said, blood tests when we're looking at hormones, because our hormones fluctuate all the time, are pretty much pointless. So as a result of this salivary hormone and cortisol testing, we both agreed that my estrogen levels were way too high. My cortisol levels, had been, and they were now completely depleted. My progesterone and testosterones were also, pretty much down the toilet, hence my absolute lack of sex drive. My thyroid was hanging in there by a thread. So it wasn't an ideal situation, and we both agreed that something needed to change, before it became a medically diagnosed condition. So the first step was the Mirena coming out. So GP didn't actually take Mirenas out. That wasn't in her job's sort of scope. But the owner of the jury did. So I booked in with him and man, oh yeah, this guy was from a different century. I went in there, told him what to do. He didn't look at any of my files. And he just sort of said to me, he goes, oh, well, the Mirena works for everyone. You'll be begging me to put it back in. Now, me being me, I've looked at this guy going, I don't think I'm going to be begging you to do anything. All right. Because picture this, like he's sort of like early 60s, not a picture of Hill, so his credentials in my eyes were questionable at best. Then he told me that I should go on to HRT. So, because hundreds of women had begged him for HRT. And I was like, yeah, well, that's not, I'm just here to get the Mirena ready. I don't want a conversation, anything. So he took the Mirena. Luckily, he was good at that part of his job. But he and I never had a conversation about how I was feeling and what I wanted. He didn't acknowledge what he and I had already discussed. And he'd given me a script for a synthetic-based estrogen when my estrogen levels were already sky high. Okay, it was my progesterone and testosterone that was low. All right, so, really nothing wrong with HRT per se, but it needs to be the right sort of HRT. So when I'm in perimenopause, I've got high estrogen and low progesterone. The last thing that, I would have needed would be a synthetic estrogen to just top up my already high levels. So what this did, it really made me wonder, and I was actually in shock, to be honest, at how women are coerced into treatments that aren't right for them. Because A, don't know, which is why we go to the doctor in the first place, and B, are prescribed treatments that just aren't right, for them at the time, and potentially, could make things worse. And, this is all because the GP hasn't taken the time to listen. Now, this is not to say that there aren't good GPs out there. There definitely are. And, my GP, she was amazing. But it was just this guy who came in with this sort of old-fashioned tutorial sort of attitude. Hundreds of women are begging me for this. And, everyone, they all love the HRT. And I'm just like, yeah, no, because I knew enough about my own body. I knew where I was at in my perimenopause kind of journey. And ladies, if you are not happy with what your treatment plan is, you don't have to accept that. Keep going until you find a good GP or a good, natural therapy practitioner, such as myself. And this is my whole aim with the Hormone Hub, empower you with the knowledge of how your body works, where you're at in journey, so you can be your own health warrior. Know the difference between what's normal and what, so you can have, a confident, educated conversation. Not just to be told that, oh yeah, hundreds of thousands of women have begged for it. Needless to say, I never went again. So I'm on this hormonal journey with you ladies. With half a thyroid, my own experience of or adrenal fatigue means that I get it. Not that my experience is going to be the same as yours, but I understand the frustrations of trying to figure out what's going on and not being heard by medical professions because, you don't fit into a particular box. And I'm pleased to say at 50, my energy is fantastic. I'm back to the same weight I was at 50. My thyroid's manageable, and while my adrenals can get a little cranky from time to time, I recognise the signs, know to listen to those whispers. Because ladies, if you don't listen to the whispers, eventually they will turn into screams. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. You can head on over to the show notes at kyliepinwell.com/podcast, where you'll find all the links, and I have a little bonus surprise waiting for you. Before we go, it would mean the world to me if you head on over to your favourite podcasts channel, subscribe and leave a review. Make sure to screenshot it, DM it to me so I can thank you personally. Then stay tuned for next week's episode. Can't wait to see you then.